What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 71 of Lobbing Scorchers. This is Ari Lillienwall. I got producer Noah here with me, and we're going to be covering a club tonight that we don't normally cover super in-depth. A club by the name of the Portland Timbers. We don't usually cover the Portland Timbers, but based on recent events that took place in the wildcard round of the MLS Cup Playoffs, we're going to be doing a show tonight that's predominantly devoted to covering the Portland Timbers. Noah, how are you feeling about that?
Well, Ari, today we act as journalists. We act as we take our Seattle Sounders punditry hat off, and I'm wearing a suit. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm a journalist, and today I take no pleasure, but also all of the pleasure in documenting the downfall of the Portland Timbers.
That's right. We're going to review the wild card round of the MLS Cup playoffs. The playoffs are here, and they have started. So the Portland Timbers started their playoff campaign at Providence Park against the Vancouver Whitecaps on Wednesday, and it did not go well.
No.
It did not go very well at all.
Some would say disaster.
They're not in the playoffs anymore, needless to say. And I think it's fair to say, Noah, that we watched the absolute implosion of a soccer club live on MLS Season Pass.
Yeah.
And not only did they implode during the game on the field and watch their season crash and burn on their home field, but they're now roiled in chaos, controversy, turmoil. The national pundits are lighting them up. There's all kinds of reports coming out about discord between the star players and the GM. We have a blazing hot press conference for you. One of the most blazing hot press conferences of the year.
I think this just wins it.
Well, it wins it not necessarily because of like their demeanor, but because of I think the situation, and kind of how hot their takes at the press conference were, considering the circumstances. You know, some would say that they could have and should have handled that differently. We're going to talk about that. But there's just a lot to get to with the Portland Timbers. And, you know, I think, Noah, this show, it's not even really just about just gloating like, the Timbers, they lost really bad in the playoffs. Their season's over. They're kind of a mid club in general right now. Like this is about their downfall, I think, on a deeper level than that.
Yeah.
This is about a club that is Seattle's biggest rival, most heated rival, hated enemies that are now in a place where they are so not only far from relevance, but far from being like a functional organization that it's worth talking about the implications that has, I think, both on the rivalry with Seattle, but with Portland standing in the league right now, and also, I think by proxy, like the Cascadia standing in the league, which, you know, we're always partial to, but with the Timbers just down this bad on this many levels, I don't know. I mean, we're going to get into it, but there's just a lot to chew on with this, and much more than I expected. I did not think that this game would leave us with the type of discourse that we've been talking about, but it's crazy to be here where we sit.
I mean, I know the playoffs were going to deliver some of the best content for us possible this year, but I didn't expect it to be this spicy, this soon, and this sweet.
Yeah,
I mean, this sweet.
All right, so let's jump into it. But before we do all that, we do have a couple of Seattle items that we're going to get to before we dive into the Timbers
coverage.
One
of them is us, because we're here in Seattle.
Yeah, that is true. But I do have to let you know before we get to that Lobbing Scorchers is a part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Located in Seattle.
If you want to get the best independent Seattle soccer coverage, consider supporting us by going to sounderatheart.com/LS. That's sounderatheart.com/LS. Scroll down to subscribe and support to get 30 days completely free. Every sign up through our link helps support and grow this show. Noah, we are still sitting on 39 subs as I understand it. Folks, I said that once we hit 40, we'll stop reading the list. Some of you out there talking, I don't like it when you guys read the list.
You must like it.
You must like it because we need one sub and then we won't read it anymore, and we haven't got it yet. So until we hit that 40, Noah, please thank the subs.
Ladies, gentlemen, MBs, welcome to the Lobbing Scorchers supporters list, brought to you by you, the fans. Lobbing Scorchers, sounderatheart.com/LS. Get your name, the last name, on the list. Here we go. Kenneth Wade, Joey Pasquinelli, David McCoy, Owen Mason, Daniel Pavato, Samuel Fout, Ian Mitchell, Christopher Smith, Norm Bontier, Thomas Martin, Greg Hoker, Chris Maley, Andy Hill, Mike Lentini, Nate Bontier, David Rodriguez, CJ and Miles Marinakis.
My nephews.
Mark Ottinger, Zach Heckman, David Pope, Brian Morton, Claire Berger, Robert Singh, Tyler Nakatsu, Steve Hudson, Choska, Patrick Sexton, John Hammaker, Amam Ubach, Justin Walker, Jay Anders, Ryan Shane, Nathan Jones, Benjamin Dubashar, Isaac Johnson, Matthew Burns, Ryan Boone, Brian Shaw, and Bill Breitenbach. Bill, thank you for subscribing.
Thank you, Bill. God, that's a great list. Help us on the drive to 40 subs. We only need one more. I know there's one person out there that will be our 40th sub. And also, if you have not done so yet, please subscribe to the Lobbing Scorchers YouTube. We're on the drive to 650 right now. We're at like 626. We had a bit of an uptick. I put a tweet out when we got to 599 to get us over 600.
You were juicing.
I juiced it, and we're up in the 620s. So please help us on the drive to 650 subs on YouTube. All right, let's get into this show, Noah. Like I said, before we get into the Timbies, which is going to be the majority of the content this evening, we do have a couple of Sounders news items that we got to hit before this playoff game coming up on Monday. Number one, Brian Schmetzer signed a contract extension, a multi-year deal, as I understand it. I have not seen specifics on length, but it's a multi-year contract extension. So Schmetz isn't going anywhere. There was times where this season was at a point where the Schmetzer's future discourse was out there, and I think we were pretty consistent that we were not on that train. But needless to say, the train, people might still be on it, but it's like derailed as far as the idea, the concept of Schmetz out. Schmetz has signed an extension. So I think real quick, we should just touch on, are we surprised at this? Is this a good move? And has the way that we view Brian Schmetzer as a coach changed this year? I'll start with that first one. And I think we've talked about it a lot in recent weeks, especially with us kind of sizing up his coach of the year candidacy. But the way I view Schmetz as a coach has changed a lot. I think before this year, I bought into a lot more the idea of Schmetz as an elite man and manager that's not necessarily like his strength is not the X's and O's. It's more about man management and putting players in the best position to succeed, to get the most out of them, more than it is about how he like understands the nuances or the tactics behind the game, which I never have considered him like bad at tactics. It's just not what you think of when you think of the strengths of Brian Schmetzer. I think he put on his coaching hat more than he ever had to this year, given the situation with Raul. And I think stuff like the Paul Rothrock breakout and just in general getting the team to a place where they got 57 points this season, even without Raul Ruidiaz and Pedro de la Vega for most of the year. I think it's the best coaching job that he's done since he took over in 2016. And I definitely think that when you have stability like that and a coach that's won as much as he has, as consistently as he has, on top of the local Seattle connection, where you know that there's literally not a person on earth who cares more about the Seattle Sounders being good and winning than specifically Brian Schmetzer. Yeah. And so
played there when he was 17?
Yeah, and I think like in his tenure with the team, you've seen the effect that it has when the person at the helm has organic like investment in the success of the club and the team. Right. Like any fan that's mad when they lose, he cares more than anyone, you know? Yeah. And I think that's kind of a unique thing in pro sports, that someone who has such deep roots can come up and have such a long run with one team. And I think the result of that speaks for itself as far as the trophy haul since he's been the coach, and how a lot of the young players have developed. We started to see that a lot more with Obed Vargas and RBW and Josh Atencio really contributing more in these last couple years. So, yeah, I think it's a good move. I think unless things go really off the rails, Schmetz has earned the equity to coach this team as long as he wants, I think. So I'm not surprised, and I think it's a good move.
No, I agree. I was super excited when they announced the contract extension. I wasn't even surprised. I think there were some people out there who were wondering if Brian wanted to come back, if this was really like how much longer he has in the tank, really, just because he's getting older.
He's been at it for a while too. It's a lifestyle that not everyone wants to live forever.
Yeah, and I think that it's totally valid for him to at some point want to step away, and that's what he said at his press conference, is there will be a day that comes when I'm ready to move on and ready to move into the next phase of my life. But I think he said something funny. He was like, people are working into their older ages every single year, and he felt kind of like that. But this year specifically, I don't know if it's changed my perspective on him as much as it's broadened it. I was in agreement with you. I definitely saw him as a man manager. I thought he was a pretty good tactical manager as well, especially from some of the things that he was able to do and change in previous seasons, especially specifically last season and the season before that, where he was able to man manage great, but the tactics shift, or at least listening to his assistant coaches that were advising him on tactical shifts, was saved seasons. And again, it did it this season. So I'm super stoked. And he's just like, this is what the question posed to me. Like when I saw him resign, I thought to myself, he is technically the most successful manager currently in MLS. Speaking just of MLS trophies, I know Tata Martino exists, but is he the best coach ever in MLS history?
Yeah, I think it's worth touching on that real quick, because it is worth talking about where he ranks in the pantheon, I think, all-time head coaches in this league. And, I think the thing you're going to always hear people bring up with that, at least from the outside, is that he's a little bit harder to judge than your average coach, or just because of his surroundings, both in terms of the fact that he's stayed with one organization all the way dating back to his playing days, but from an assistant coach to an MLS coach, he's only ever been with one club, and that happens to be a club that is known as a club that is one of the most kind of stable and consistent winning organizations. So how much do you attribute that to coaching? How much do you attribute that to ownership support and like culture around the club and things like that? Could any coach have had the type of success that Schmetzer's had here? Would he have the same success if he went somewhere else? We would never really know the answer to that question unless he went and coached another team, which he actually almost did at one point. People forget, but he interviewed with CF Montreal and I think FC Dallas at different junctures when Siggy was the coach. But he never ended up taking those jobs and ended up seeing it all the way through with Seattle. Best coach ever. I don't know if you're ever going to get anyone who's not from Seattle to say that, but he certainly has the most decorated trophy case of any coach ever. That's not until someone else wins Champions League. Like, you can't even debate that. He's been to 4 MLS Cups and won a couple of those too. And he was an instrumental assistant in the early days. Well, the USL days when the team was really good and won a lot, and the early MLS days when they rattled off those 4 Open Cups and the Supporters Shield. So, the national pundits are probably never going to give him that moniker, but he's certainly up there.
Yeah, I don't think anyone will give him his flowers until he's retired. Anyway, I just don't think that that's generally how people talk about coaches. They're so focused on, the nostalgia of it. But I really do truly think that at the end of his career, when he retires, when he walks away from the Sounders, that he will be remembered as, if not the greatest coach in the history of the league, the greatest coach in the history of the league. Can't deny. CCC, 2 MLS Cups, and more. I mean,
speaks for itself, I think. Yeah. Other news item that since we last recorded, Jackson Ragen has been named one of the 3 finalists for the Defender of the Year. We talked about the other 2 extensively on our year-end awards show. Steven Moreira and Jordi Alba are the other 2 finalists. So really, I think what's interesting about this is that he was voted a finalist at all. I didn't really see that coming. I felt like he and Yamar were kind of splitting the adulation to a point where, like, it's hard to pick one over the other. So who do you pick? He ends up in there, and I think he actually has a decently good chance to win that, because that tells me that there's a lot of people who feel like it should go to a center back or, a player who's defense first. Like Jordi Alba, like, he is listed as a defender, but what makes him such a great player, I mean, he's a very good 2-way player, but what makes him the best left back ever is what he brings in attack, which is I think the best the best attacking fullback I've ever watched play. But like he's not like defender of the year. I think the connotation should be they're elite at specifically defense. You know, not the best two-way threat, not the highest assist total, not the most goal dangerous CB. So I think under that criteria, Jackson Ragen actually has the most merit, even though I think on our previous discussions of this, I think I undersold how good Steven Morea is at defense. And that is a big part of his value to the Crew. But I still think primarily like Columbus fullbacks, they're kind of Columbus's whole back line. Like you never know when they're going to make a run, and either the fullbacks are going to have you on your heels and send in dangerous service, or the CB is going to be like right on the doorstep. So that's sort of like what makes him valuable, I think, more than his defensive qualities. But I don't know. I haven't watched all that much Steven Morea to say that.
Fuck him.
But, you know, he might get it. But Jackson Ragen has a chance.
Yeah, no, I don't think... I don't know. Actually, I did hear quite a bit of rumblings, national pundit-wise, about Jackson Ragen, and people were pretty stoked on him over Yamar, which I was like, I mean, okay, like, that's cool. Like, I like them both, but... I would have picked Yamar over Jackson Ragen, but I think Yamar complements Jackson Ragen and makes Jackson Ragen look like a Defender of the Year candidate more than if you just standalone put Jackson Ragen out there or standalone put Yamar out there. Regardless, shout out to the Michigan boy, go Blue. Their football team's terrible, but at least, you know, maybe they'll win a Defender of the Year.
They might have the MLS Defender of the Year, so they can hang their hat on that. All right, let's get to the Timbies, because this is going to be the best part of the show. There is so much to get to with this game, and I think before we get into everything that took place in the last couple of days, because it really is wild, I think it's worth taking a brief moment to just kind of set the stage, both for just our perceptions from the outside of the Timbies this season, and then also heading into this game in particular. And I'll just say, you know, the Timbies finished in ninth place this year. So that by definition, Phil Neville even admitted this, that by definition is a middling year. So
if not actively bad,
I can't say that I spent all that much time even really thinking about the Portland Timbies aside from when they played Seattle. And I think Seattle people have a skewed perception of where things stand with them because they have specifically owned the Seattle rivalry. Every time that Portland plays Seattle, they look like Real Madrid. But I can tell you guys, watching more Timbers games than just when they play Seattle, they are not that good.
They are Real mid.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Real mid.
Exactly.
Did you guys got
so like not that good of a year, not that good of a team, but I can't say I considered them like a meltdown candidate, you know, like a catastrophic disaster, like they're going to go to the playoffs and look like they have no dignity out on their home field. That is not really in the range of outcomes that I thought was going to happen. My perception of the Timbies going into this game was a team that has actually had a very good offense this year. They were one of the highest scoring teams in the league. And if you look at just their attackers and the output that they had this year, they had one of the most most production from different sources, like I think of any team that I looked at. Like when you put Evander put up 8 MVP numbers, he was at like 15 and 19 by the time it was all said and done. So he was the guy. But like Felipe Mora, Sante Moreno, I think even Loria, I want to say, like Anthony
4 and 6.
Yeah, like all these guys had pretty good years in attack, and in general, like when they got rolling on offense, they could score with just about anybody, but a pretty big train wreck on defense.
Yeah.
They were just conceding multiple goals every single game. They played a lot of like kind of crazy shootout type games, and really like their defensive performance kneecapped them from being a true contender. But like they were a very productive and dynamic offense, and I didn't think they were going to make a playoff run, but like I figured, I thought they would have gotten by the Whitecaps. And, you know, when you have an offense like that, you can hang with anybody in an individual game. So this was not like an expected thing at all.
Yeah. Here's what I'll do to set the stage, right? I agree with you. Timbers to Sounders fans are like this boogeyman, but I think to the rest of the league for the last few years, they've been quite irrelevant.
Mid at best.
Yeah. Not only that, I think Portland fans too understand that and like actively despise their club a little bit.
Well, there's been all kinds of other stuff with the fan base and ownership, which I think plays into the chaos that we're witnessing now. Like that whole like dynamic in the culture of the team. It feels like it hit this this boiling point. Yeah.
Yeah, like you had the simmer, obviously ownership being god awful. I don't wish that upon any fan. And then at the beginning of this season, signing a new jersey sponsor, and then like a week after doing that, some incredibly horrific things come out about that company, and they're like, shit, we got to change it. Like just the start of the season through the play, you have an MVP caliber season from a player, and yet you're still incredibly middling. That's like woof. Like you're already woof.
And they weren't, I don't think Phil Neville was really happy with finishing in 9th. I don't think their fan base was particularly happy about finishing in 9th. And yeah, this is all in the first year that Phil Neville was the coach of the team, which I think pretty clearly proved to be a downgrade from Gio Savarese.
100%.
The Gio Savarese era, I think, had run its course by the end, but it was pretty successful in the times that they have been relevant in the last few years. I think he showed that he was a pretty like solid floor coach, if like a solid floor, but maybe not like a high ceiling coach.
Yeah.
But either way, middling but not like terrible team going into the playoffs this year. But the sequence of events that took place once the playoffs started for them was really a sight to behold. I have never seen a meltdown like this, and I'm gonna do the whole recap, Noah, front to back.
Run it through.
Tell me if I missed anything, but then we're gonna talk about what we make of all this. Okay, I think it's important to point out at first that this game was played at Providence Park when it was not supposed to be. Portland got awarded this home game on a technicality, which was it's a very MLS occurrence here, but Portland only had the hosting rights for this game because BC Place, where the Whitecaps play their home games, had a motocross event scheduled for when the Whitecaps were supposed to host the game as the 8 seed. They finished as the higher seed, but they had a motocross event, and apparently there was no field that was up to code for them to be able to host the game elsewhere, which it would have been funny if they played at like UBC or something, you know, but they just had the lower seed host. I don't know if there's a rule on that or what, but
they just
just decided that the Timbers were hosting even though they were the lower seed because of motocross. So the fact that they were hosting the game at all was kind of just they shouldn't have been, but they got this home game. And then Phil Neville gave a quote, which I think is important, that I think probably came to regret, which is that he said when he was asked about the fact that they got awarded hosting rights on this technicality, he said, "Oh, well, it seems like God might be a Timbers fan," or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And I know he was probably saying that in jest, and it's the type of quote that when it's written out, it reads differently than like if he's just kind of saying it offhandedly.
He literally said God is a Timbers fan.
He said God is a Timbers fan because they got this game.
Like,
and we're going to get to the Vanni Sartini response to that because that is, I think, my favorite part of this whole thing. But
we got to hold there for a minute. God, that is the most, I don't even think the context makes it better. He literally, God is a Timbers fan. You are literally setting yourself up for bulletin board Twitter troll material. Yeah. You are the 9th seed. I understand it's a joke, but it's like, sir, have some tact.
It's just like you said, you set yourself up for if you have an outcome like this.
Yeah, you're cooked.
You're even more cooked than you already were.
Yeah.
So yeah, he shouldn't have said that, but the fact that he did was good content.
Incredible.
Anyway,
keep it up.
Needless
Phil.
To say,
give him the mic.
The Whitecaps go down to Portland for the wild card game, and during the game, the Timbers go out there and get absolutely blasted off the field. I don't even really think like the specifics of the game. There's that much to it, other than that the Whitecaps absolutely destroyed them. Scottish Messi was going crazy. He scored a hat trick. The other Scottish guy got scored. Like the entire country of Scotland took over Providence Park. By the time it was all said and done, the Vancouver Whitecaps had 5 goals. 5 They hung 5 on them in the playoffs in their own building.
What's the highest?
5-0.
I'm fact checking with the highest most goals in a playoff game.
I mean, it's definitely the Whitecaps have actually won 5-0. I know that was their second 5-goal game. So I think there's been some.
Maybe God's a Whitecaps fan.
It was a non-competitive game, which for a home playoff game, I mean, I saw Phil Neville's press conference before this game, and he was saying there's this buzz in the building that's palpable. The city, you can feel it. You can feel it in the city. And then they go out and they get 5-0'd. 5-0'd
And Brian Gauld looks like Jesus. If the Timbers are God, he was Jesus, and he struck them down.
But like I think what was striking about the game itself was the extent to which it looked like they checked out.
They didn't care.
They didn't care. There's a couple of them that cared. Phil Neville mentioned David Ayala seemed like he cared, and I think it's clear that Evander cares.
Yeah,
based on events that we'll talk about. But like a lot of their guys, it didn't seem like they cared. No, that's just wild to me because I mean, like. You might know that you're a mid-team, but you got the game at home. Like, yeah, you got to, I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of like blazing hot presser implications to get to from this. Neville gave his post-game presser after the game where he called out his team, basically. He said that there were guys on the field that gave up. He said there's going to be a lot of changes. He said that a lot of the players on the team don't realize how lucky they are to play for a club like that. So there was that was a pretty good presser, but the better one was today, which we're going to get to that. Vandy Sartini's presser was blazing hot as well. This is where he responded to Phil Neville saying that God was a Timbers fan for scheduling a motocross. That's the other thing about this. Is like
God's actually a motocross fan.
Yeah, like the logical extension of God being a Timbers fan in this exact scenario is that God, planning for the MLS playoffs and realizing that he wants the Timbers to win is like, how do I get them to host even though they're the lower seed? I'm going to schedule a motocross event at BC Place, and then they'll have to play in Portland. Portland, I have a better chance at winning. If God was really a Timbers fan, I think God would have just made Portland win regardless of the venue that it was getting played at, And frankly, I would hope that God has better things to do. I don't want to. I don't want to get too bogged down in the theology of it. But anyway, Vandy Sartini at his post-game press conference, they asked him about. I don't know if they was asked specifically or if he mentioned it himself, but he said, "God can be a Timbers fan, but God doesn't exist for me." Woo! That is the coldest quote I've ever heard. That is my favorite MLS coach quote I've ever heard.
Put that shit on a t-shirt.
Given the teams involved and the circumstances, that is my favorite MLS coach quote of all time.
He's so good.
That is number one. He's the man. Sign him to an extension.
No, like Vandy Sartini, I would pay an extra $100 a year for an Apple TV show where they just like a what's it, Hard Knocks, but it's just Vandy Sartini mic'd up throughout the day. Like I would pay $1 billion. All he ever does at pressers is drop bangers like this.
Yeah, but this is the best.
He's
banger.
a chef.
God can be a Timbers fan, but God doesn't exist for me. I want to get that tattooed on myself. Like that is. It's the best MLS coach quote of all time. Incredible. I can't believe he said that. Anyway, so Vandy Sartini is saying that at his press conference. Meanwhile, as far as I can tell, Evander went straight from the field to the locker room and just went directly to his phone.
Straight to Twitter.
He pulled out his phone. He had Twitter up before Phil Neville even got back in there to give the post-game pep talk.
He's on the toilet taking his shit posting.
He was posting. Just absolutely typing. And so Evander put out, it was like he threaded it up. It was like 5 or 6
dude,
tweets.
He effort posted, dude. Yeah. He was on there like 7. He was like, thread of why I hate this team.
1 out of 7.
2 out of 7. It's like he didn't even know how many he was going to post. It was just like 1 out of X. You know, they'd be doing that. Oh my God.
So Evander unleashed all of his grievances with the club all at once on Twitter immediately following the game. I think he did it from the locker room. Like because I saw those tweets like very soon after final whistle. He was apologizing to the fan base, but like I think we see athletes take to Twitter a lot to say sorry to the fans. Thanks for coming out this year. Not the result we wanted, but
fans.
This was not that. This was the fans deserve better than the people who run this club. That's essentially what he said. Like, there's no more charitable reading of it than that. There's no like way that he could have been misinterpreted. He essentially said the fans who follow and support this club deserve better than the people who run it. And what does he mean by that? Well, I'm sure, I mean, we can be pretty sure that he's talking about the owner, Merritt Paulson, and a report from Tom Bogues, Tommy Scoops. Tommy Scoops got the scoop. And,
Tommy Tank Tops.
Apparently, in the locker room after the game, per Tom Bogues, Evander specifically called out Ned Grabavoy in front of the team. Like, it was like everyone was sitting there, and he calls out Grabavoy. He says, "This is your fault. This is your fault. You did this." So, anyway, that's not good. That's your star player. That's your MVP candidate who had 30-plus goal contributions. Read the tweets.
Evander Ferreira, at official Evander. First, I want to apologize to all the fans who, on a Wednesday night, dropped everything to support us. It's really hard to lose the way we did. The truth is, losing is not our plans, but we have to deal with it. I want to say that we, the players and the entire staff, did everything we could to take Portland as far as possible. However, sometimes we have no control over what happens, and what happens off the field reflects on the field. Portland fans do not deserve the people who have power over this club. People who say that they are men, but they do not keep their word. People who are only there when the team wins. Unfortunately, these are the things we have no control over. I have always fought and will continue to fight to put this team on top. To the fans, you deserve so much more. Thank you for your unconditional support, and we'll see you next season.
Yeah, so after your season ends, ideally you don't want your highest paid, best player, MVP candidate, face of the club player tweeting that. That's not...
That's less than good. That's bad, actually.
I think suboptimal is the term
correct
that I was looking for. So needless to say, the national pundits lit up the Timbies about as bad as I've ever seen a team get lit up. Like, we don't even really need to pile on in that respect. I mean, we're going to, but like, it's not just us gloating and talking shit is what I'm saying. Like, I heard one pundit call it the worst playoff performance in MLS history, which I don't have as much of a frame of reference for that, but certainly since I've psychotically followed the league, which is since about 2013, 2014, I've never seen a meltdown like that on the field in a playoff game. I feel like I've seen some bad ones, but even irrespective of the score line, just the vibe out there.
Oh, like, it was awful.
It was
awesome for us. It was I was soaking that in.
I enjoyed it, but if we enjoyed it, that's not good for them. That's not
like
good.
As we are the journalists right now, objectively bad.
I saw it called the worst performance in MLS playoff history. I saw it called a lot of things: embarrassing, terrible,
fold the club,
fold the club, whatever you want to say. They were saying it. The fan base had already been talking about how they wanted to fire Phil Neville pretty much from the moment he was hired. But
correct.
They were really talking about it last night. Ned Grabavoy is under the gun way more, I think, than I've ever seen since he took over that job. They scheduled another presser immediately after the post-game presser. They had a release out that was like, we're having another presser. It's like, maybe give it a couple days, guys. But no, they were like, we want to get right back up on the podium. So
like,
they did that today.
Cook.
But needless to say, the future of their entire organization is in flux, I think it's fair to say. The players are revolting. The star player DP he's averaging 26 tweets per hour. He might still be posting. GM under siege. And while all this is going on, Phil Nevs and Ned Grabavoy had another press conference today, which, like I said, I did not think that was a good idea, but I was glad that we were thinking about recording yesterday, but then it turned out that the presser was today. We waited till after the presser, which turned out to be a good idea because this was a very blazing hot presser, and this is our segment, Blazing Hot Coach Presser of the Week, and it's going to be featuring Timbers general manager Ned Grabavoy. But there was a lot to this presser. I watched the whole thing, but I thought the craziest part of this presser was that they were asked about the Evander thing, and not only did they simmer the feud down, they ratcheted it up.
Yeah,
they ratcheted it up. They
They lit a firework and threw it.
They Ned Grabavoy started it off, called him selfish, went from there. We're going to actually play the audio right now. We have a couple clips from this. Just listen to Ned Grabavoy and Phil Neville's responses to this controversy surrounding their star player, Evander.
I found it to be incredibly selfish, if I'm being honest. He's a brilliant player. He's not a bad person, but I think it was poor judgment. That was a difficult night. On Wednesday, there's a lot of emotion, and it was a low point for the club. I'm thinking about the supporters that were in the crowd that came to support. I'm thinking about a lot of players in that locker room who've given their all for the entire season, and some in question even be back with our club. I'm thinking about our staff and our coaching staff and our support staff that show up to this building every day and grind, for the team. I thought there was not a need in that moment to make it about an individual. So I do think it was a lapse in judgment.
Can I just say something? I was incredibly disappointed with that post that got put out. And that's coming from someone that Evander is like my second child. I wanted to sign him in Miami. When I came here, I think I've given him a platform to perform. I think he's delivered on the pitch. I think his performances this year has been incredible. And then when you have a defeat like we had on Wednesday night, the last thing that this club needed was from our DP player to come out and say something publicly like that. It's not right. It affects the culture of the club. It affects everything that we're doing, undermines everything that we're doing. And I spoke to Evander about that. And there's no bigger fan of that boy than me. But I felt incredibly let down because what we said at the start of the season is we're building a culture here of togetherness and spirit. And you do not air your dirty laundry in public. That's an English saying. But that, for me, went against everything that we are trying to build at this football club. We've offered him the biggest contract in the club's history when we didn't need to. He's under contract, but we believe in him. We trusted him. That's why the business people at the club, the front office, Ned, and the ownership offered him that contract. And to wake up to that, because I went to bed early, to wake up to that, I felt incredibly let down. I think that's really important because we're all together at this football club. We're one, the supporters, the players, and the team. And when we lose together. And that's why I felt incredibly let down. And I'd say that from a point of view is that Evander is like my second child.
Okay, so here's what I don't understand about this. And I'll just tell you, if I was in this situation, how I would have handled it and kind of compare that to how they handled it right there. Mm-hmm. Okay, if I am the GM or the coach in that situation and we just got 5-0'd in the playoffs in our own building, our star player is heated, he fires off some tweets that don't necessarily portray the organization in a great light.
In a contract talks with him.
Yeah, and there's a contract dispute that's kind of underscoring all of this and how the relations have deteriorated between the player and the organization. But my approach to that would be, look, both of our jobs in a lot of ways ride on this guy being happy and being a star player for our team. If he gets disgruntled, then we have to transfer him after the year that he just had, carrying our team. And our team was still bad, even though he had 30-plus goal contributions. We have to keep him happy. If we don't and we sell him on, we miss on the replacement, or it takes a while for whoever we replace to get acclimated, we will get fired. How do we do this? How do we manage this? I would have gone up to that podium if I had the presser at all. I would have gone up to the podium and I would have been like, yeah. So with the Evander thing, obviously the tweets were suboptimal. Probably wish he wouldn't have said that, but he's an emotional guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's been a model citizen, a great player for this organization, and we're in contract talks with him right now. We're looking forward to getting that signed, and we had a talk with him about the tweets, but we understand emotions were running high in the moment. He probably said some stuff in the heat of it that maybe he didn't necessarily mean, but we love Evander. We're looking forward to having him on the team. And we're going to push forward from there. Yeah. That's it. That's or just, maybe not exactly that, but something to that effect.
I would have just said you know what? Yeah, There is no defending how terribly we played out there, and we need to take a long, hard
He's
look.
mad for a reason.
Yeah, be like, you gotta
can make it
co-sign his anger.
You can make it like I'm taking accountability thing, even if you're not. That's it's you just have to say that stuff.
Yeah.
What you don't say is,
why are you lighting a match in a room full of gasoline? What are you doing?
Just chill. Like, even if you think that he's being selfish, why would you say that to the media?
He is, but it doesn't matter because he is $10 million record transfer fee superstar that your entire job is hinging on. You're just being like, you're being selfish.
You're self-sabotaging is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't understand that response at all. They literally, watch the clips again. They are clearly trying to incite, they're trying to escalate. They're trying to escalate the dispute.
Petulance.
So I think Evander's future with the club right now is very much in flux.
Yeah.
Would you want to come back to this team if you were him? I would.
Hell no. Not if those two were there.
Hell no. And that is, I guess, where we can start getting into some of the future implications of this meltdown, because I don't think there's any guarantee at all that this contract dispute that they were already in before all this happened with Evander is going to get resolved in a way where he's back with the club. What do they even do after that? This is a player who's in the prime of his career, a signing that they actually hit on, who, for everything else that went wrong for them this year, looked like a building block, looked like a player
Saved their
that
season.
could be a week in, week out, carry the load type player. Also, by all accounts, like an awesome guy. Everyone at their club loves him. Great teammate, fantastic player. I gotta say, some of the bangers that he scored, like, I can't even hate. Like, he's an elite player in the league. Why are you publicly feuding with him? I cannot figure out. I cannot figure out for the life of me.
But then again, it does fit. It so perfectly fits the culture of the Portland Timbers in a way, because, like, I don't know if you remember this, but I don't know if Merritt Paulson is still on Twitter, but that was one of my favorite, like, silent follows.
I forgot. I miss his tweets.
He would feud with his own fans and call them fucking stupid and, like, be like, yeah, shut the fuck up. I own the club. I'm going to do whatever I want. He would do that on Maine. He would do that shit on Maine. And I can imagine.
He had to stop tweeting.
They literally had to legally get him to stop tweeting. That the club board had to.
I totally forgot about the Merritt
They
tweets.
locked his phone away. But I'm saying, if that's how he was online, I cannot imagine how he's going to take this situation. Like, there is 100% chance where they went to him, or not 100%, but, there's a large chance that they went to him with this situation and he was like, man, fuck that guy. Fuck that guy. Go talk your shit. Go chirp back. That's 100% the way that the Timbers have always been. So I know that, like, this situation is just going to get worse because you have a petulant owner who is, like, a total baby. And I think Portland fans would agree with me. They hate their owner.
Yeah, they can't. That's been a whole. That's like, I think the biggest thing, the undertone of all of it is this kind of long simmering feud between the owner and the fan base, which, like I said, it really feels like this was a boiling point that got reached. I think it's worth talking about, too, the hire of Phil Neville to begin with. I mean, I can tell you, when they made this hire, like, all joking aside of, like, oh, yeah, extend him, like, I didn't really understand it, because I can understand looking for candidates who have MLS experience and using that as a criteria for when you're hiring a coach. But I think I would want it to be good MLS experience. If you look at Phil Neville's track record before he got to Portland, he was the coach of Inter Miami before Messi and the Barca boys got there. They were not a good team.
They committed fraud.
The only
crimes.
I just can't. I don't understand the process behind landing on him as an upgrade, supposedly, over Gio Savarese, because his run at Inter Miami, the way that that run could have gone, where I would be like, Phil Neville would be a good MLS hire for another club, would be if with the roster what it was when Phil Neville was the coach, without Messi, without all the stars yet, if he had them punching above their weight and like being a solid playoff team and looking much better than the sum of their parts, I think that would be like, okay, this is an intriguing candidate. This is a guy who he didn't have much to work with. He had them playing pretty decent ball, like with less resources than we'll have here. Like, let's see what he can do with our team, which has more pieces in place than that Miami team had at the time. And this hire has upside. There's what is the element of that based on how that Miami tenure went? They were basically as bad as you would think,
right?
Like given the sanctions and the roster that they
were cheating and they still couldn't win. They were spooning.
This was at a time when remember that whole team was built around Rodolfo Pizarro, which is one of the worst DP signings of all time. So, but like my point is there's just nothing about Phil Neville at Inter Miami where I was like, oh yeah, put him on Portland and that's gonna be electric.
No.
Like what?
Yeah.
So. I never thought that it made that much. Like, it's going pretty much how I would think it would based on his track record, which you would think would have been taken into account when they were evaluating who to hire.
Yeah, and it's hilarious, too, because it's like, if you look at the head coaches, right, like, they could, they didn't, but let's say they would have let Savarese go. In some kind of other world, they literally could have signed the one, the only coach of the year candidate, Wilfried Nancy. Like, you could, I'm just saying, there's like a billion other coaches that were at other clubs that you could have
it was
like
not
picked.
Like Phil Neville or bust. Like you can hire anyone.
Yeah, you could literally hire anyone. Like and they were like, let's take the guy who wooden spooned with like a roster that was objectively bad, but also had more DPs than they were like allowed.
And he didn't even with the state of that roster, like I said, they did not punch above their weight in a way that made it look like this great coaching job and that this was just any MLS team who gets this guy is going to the moon. Phil Neville, I don't know. I just never saw that. But so I think the question though is, should they fire Phil Neville? Because that's getting talked about a lot in Portland. And look, man, from where I sit, it seems like they would be served to get rid of Phil Neville. And the way that Ned Grabs, I don't know that much about Ned Grabs, but this whole situation, and then just looking at his track record since he's been the GM, which I think is mid at best. They hit on Evander. I'll give him credit for that. But look at their defense, which was the thing that totally derailed their team. They have spent money there. They went and dropped a bag on Kamal Miller. Claudio Bravo was not a very cheap player. You could go down the list of a couple other guys that they've spent in that area of the field. The one bit of news that they announced at their presser was that they extended Diego Chara, which honestly,
who's 58 years old.
That is an example to me, a very clear example of the type of move that you shouldn't make.
Yeah.
This is something that Garth Lagerwey was good at, and every good GM is good at this, is knowing when to part ways and not letting the sentimentality cloud your judgment or what's a good use of resources. So it's as much as I hate to say it, parting ways with Ozzie Alonso when Garth Lagerwey did, that was good GMing, strategically.
Yeah.
Purely strategically and resource management wise, you have to be able to do that. Now, Chara has still been a good player for them, but my argument for why this latest extension for him at age 38 is just not the move is just you need to turn a lot of stuff over with their team, man. It's time for new blood, a new era. It's time for young guys to step up. Chara is symbolic of the 2011 Timbers. And I know he'll play there until the wheels fall off. And I think he's still got a little bit, at least in the tank. I don't think he had a bad year, but it's more the principle of it. You see what I'm saying? You need to move on from that era and kickstart a new thing. And when you're extending a guy that has been at your club for literally 15 years,
he's played 450 games for
450 games for you. You are.
He is their Aussie.
It's very obvious, right? But so imagine if Aussie was still on the Sounders. That's what it's the equivalent of. So I just think that is that's an example of a GM that is making decisions based on sentimentality and optics, what he perceives as optics, more than what's actually a smart roster move and allocation of their resources. the upside of Diego Chara being a week in, week out starter for them next year, what even is that? You think you're going to get back to MLS Cup like with him as a linchpin again? Maybe, but I don't know. That's like the bit of news that you come out with. I don't know.
It's so wild to me, One, do I think they should fire Phil Neville? No, because I want this content. We don't get this content without literally the dumbest coaching hire ever. Should they fire him if I was actually I'm putting on my journalist suit again. Yeah. His ass he should be chased out of town. Like, Portland Timbers fans should be outside of his house right now with pitchforks, like demanding that he resign. Like, objectively, a terrible coach, objectively a terrible GM who has done nothing but he hit on Evander, absolutely. But then ever since then has just been like, how do I make this team so weird and just objectively bad? Okay.
I mean, it's weird because they scored 65 goals,
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I don't really get about where things stand is it's just like, it doesn't, I feel like it doesn't need to be like this.
No.
But I guess
they need new blood. You're right.
Okay.
Like, that's where I feel like you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
It has to be a new identity.
There's a couple other things that I wanted to talk about with this. We're just going to keep vibing on the downfall of the Timbies.
Absolutely.
I don't care. People might think that we're going too long.
We did a whole
but,
damn episode on other teams.
We're
before.
easily petty enough to go another like at least 15 to 20 on the downfall of the Timbies. One thing I wanted to talk about was, is this the worst meltdown we have ever seen in MLS? The two examples I came up with in recent times, if I'm missing anything, you can drop it in the comments. But the examples that I came up with were the Toronto FC meltdown of like 2021 or whenever that was, 2022, when it came out that Bernadeschi was vaping on the plane, and then he and Insigne were feuding, and then they Bob
came
Bradley
together.
got fired, and they're somehow both still on the team. After
they came
all that.
together because they were like, you know what? I fucking
We're
hate
stronger
you, but
together than
Bob
we
Bradley
are
is dog shit.
Yeah.
And they like went to the president's office and was like, we're gonna go chain smoke cigarettes all the way back to Italy if you don't fire this guy. And he was like, yeah, okay, sure.
Right. So, but that was like a full-on meltdown where chaos and turmoil were getting reported like every day about
We
their
did a
team.
long bit on the pod.
I think we did a long bit on the pod about that. Like that was a good meltdown.
Yeah.
That was a good meltdown. It like their entire season was derailed already at that point, but they certainly delivered the content before it went down
comical.
in flames. So that was a pretty good one. And the other one was the Joseph Martinez Atlanta United chicken and rice incident, where this was when Joseph was disgruntled and disillusioned towards the end of his Atlanta United tenure. He was getting fed up because the team wasn't up to standards. And so he had been feuding with Gonzo Pineda, I think, before this even happened. But after a game, he famously flipped over a table with the pregame spread or the postgame spread that had chicken and rice went all over the locker room. And so the chicken and rice was part of it, but really it was a Joseph meltdown that took place as Atlanta United was getting derailed. Those, I think, are the two best meltdowns of recent modern times. Mm-hmm. This is better in my opinion.
Yeah.
This was the greatest meltdown I've ever seen. Like when you combine the ineptitude on the field with the blazing hot press conference in the aftermath and Evander tweeting.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Because you have to think about it. Like a lot of these things happened over many months. For the Timbers, it's like, yes, this has been boiling, but they were in a playoff spot. They were ready to go. They were ready to cook. And seemingly what happened was half the players were like, fuck this. I don't care. And then that tilts your best player. And instead of backing him as a coach and a GM, you go, oh, no, I'm going to feud with you now too. Just pure like incompetence on like all fronts and just hilarious. Like I wish I was in that locker room because I know he said some shit.
I am so curious what Evander said to Grabavoy, first of all. But also, like I said, if Evander is even back on this team.
There's no way, right?
I don't see any way how he comes back to this team if Ned Grabavoy and Phil Neville are both there. And like let's just say for the sake of argument that he leaves. Like,
Yeah.
Evander's like, I'm done with this. I can't, like, I love the city. I love the club. I love my boys, but this organization is a joke. Get me out of here. Like, what do they do? How do you replace one of the best players in the league and honestly sell to your fan base that
you know what
you're
they do?
getting better? Like, I don't think you can do that. There is no scenario if Evander leaves where they can really feasibly improve their team unless they get insanely lucky. But the thing is, all this controversy and turmoil, you got to imagine that's going to make recruiting any theoretical replacement much more difficult, right?
Yeah.
So that's another variable on top of it.
Here's what you do.
They better get this resolved, man.
Here's what you do. You call up Seattle and you say, hey, I know you got that guy who you're negotiating contracts with. His name's Albert Rusnak. What if we just did a little thing where like he goes here and you guys take Evander?
Oh, Rusnak on the Timbers though, that would be so devastating.
But that's
for
what I agree, but I would take
that Evander in a 1-for-1 swap.
Yeah, exactly.
There's only a few number 10s in the league that I would do the 1-for-1 swap for Rusnak right now. You know, like I mean, again, as always, Messi does not count. But you know, like I would swap him for Cucho and Lucho.
Yep.
And like honestly, Evander is that good where like putting him on Seattle.
Plus, it would be like that perfect bite to bring those Timbers game rivalry back because you know he'd be like, "Fuck you." Just like, oh my God, could you imagine that?
If he was actually playing against them, whatever other MLS team does get Evander eventually, whether it's after this or later on in his career, he is going to be going
That's
hard
appointment
in those games.
television.
He's pissed. And I agree with what you said, like that.
The Sounders should at least make a bid for him. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, they should be approaching him right now.
Yeah. Oh my God, that would be so funny.
Like I'm so serious. Like that is like and I'm sure that they're competent, but like if I'm them, I'm going and I'm needling that too. I'm needling, it would piss them off even more. What would show them is that you come win a cup in Seattle, is that you come play in the Club World Cup in Seattle and you do all this stuff. You just needle them on that. I'm just saying that's what I would do.
You're making a little bit of sense.
I'm just saying.
All right, I got some questions and observations from you, the people, to get to. Thank you to everyone as always who submitted. I love you guys because I put out a tweet about a Portland Timbers centric episode, and I still have you all in there getting the discourse flowing.
Yeah.
So we've selected a few out of here. I don't think all of these are questions. I think mostly I just wanted a platform for us to all vibe together on the downfall of the Portland Timbers, and mostly just like the comedic fashion in which it occurred. So anyway, Noah, what do we got? What do the people have to say?
Well, the people, specifically this people, Dean asks, I didn't watch the match, but Neville's comments on players, quote, giving up would be nice to hear examples of. Okay, yeah, so examples of them giving up in the game itself. I mean, if you just look at the goals that the Whitecaps scored, Scottish Messi got the first. Okay, the first two. The first two were nasty. Pretty well. No,
the third one was the best, I think.
Which one was the third one? The like half volley.
Oh yeah,
was fire.
that was a sick goal. I was gonna say the first two were like. It wasn't like the Timbers melting down. Like
it was just a jumble in the box.
It was just like, exactly. Like scrambles in the box. And Scottish Messi is going to burn you on those sometimes. But then the one that Brian White scored, there's just no one marking Brian White.
Yeah, he was just wide
open on like an open net. And then the last goal that Scottish Messi scored for the hat trick, multiple guys, defenders on their back line, they literally just like stopped running.
Yeah, they gave up.
They were like, they said, Scottish Messi, I see you want to score this goal. Go for it. Have it. Take the goal. And
free 99.
It was about as like checked as I think you'll ever see a team.
I think after the first goal, it was like, meh. They just turned it off. Like you could see there was like a switch that was flicked in most of the players where they were like, I don't care. I get to go home and like not play soccer for a little bit and not be around this apparently now, toxic ass environment. Yeah. Like that's really what it felt like to me
you could
visually.
You could feel that. Yeah. You could really feel that. All right, what do we got next?
That's a great question. Next question from Monroe. Are the Timbies the inverse Sounders? They have great talent, but a bad team. We have a good team without much super high talent.
The great talent they have is Evander.
Correct.
They've got solid talent on offense outside of that. But the issue with their roster right now is they have one of the best players in the league with a top-heavy offense that is very productive. But I think
Jonathan Rodriguez is pretty damn good.
Oh, Jonathan Rodriguez is really good. Sante Moreno is nasty.
Felipe
Mora has been a pretty good forward. But there was at one point this season that they were scoring so many goals that I was putting their front four with Jonathan Rodriguez and Evander and Sante Moreno up with, the Joey Paints and Gabriel Pecks, Ricky Puig's front lines of the world. They were there. I wouldn't say they were that consistently that good all season, but there was at least one stretch, probably more, given that they ended up scoring 65 goals, where they looked really good on offense. But I think, defensively, this was Diego Chara's age 37 season. I guess he played at a high enough level where they're bringing him back. But on a year where you concede 56 goals, is that really a good idea? I don't know. And then all the money they spent on the back line between Kamal Miller and, Claudio Bravo before that. They ended up in a situation where they had Finn Sermon out there, and
Sermon was cooking.
I can't really say shit because he owns the Sounders, but you still would not expect him to be on the field. Is my only point with that. So I think Monroe, it's a interesting observation, but I think that kind of oversells how good their roster really is. I think their roster has one elite player, and I guess Jonathan Rodriguez, but they can't play defense. So
I would disagree. I do think they have a really talented roster. I think if you put Brian Schmetzer in charge of this team, I think they are a genuine cup contender, if not winning the West outright. That's my take.
You think that their defense would be that much better?
I think that you would be able to find and plug holes in a better way, or at least manage a game better to where you can defend, or be like, hey, maybe my 500-year-old defensive mid is not the call. You know what I mean? I just think that, one, Phil Neville has made this team. I agree with I literally agree with Evander on what he's saying. They have Jonathan Rodriguez, who is objectively could be a superstar in this league. Evander is a superstar in this league. They have 2 9s that are pretty fucking good. You have, like you were saying, what we thought was kind of a dynamic LA Galaxy-esque attacking front, which was the same problem LA Galaxy had with just conceding constantly.
Well, and it's the same identity that Portland have had for years, which is a team that has a really good counterattack.
Correct.
And it's a lot of absorbing pressure, maybe not caring as much about possession, but when they get out and running, they will slice you apart. Think of the Diego Valeri, Sebastian Blanco years. They did that at the peak of the Gio era, and even a bit during the Caleb Porter era when they won MLS Cup. They were one of the best counterattacking teams in the league, and they were kind of one of the most just high octane transition type of teams. And they maintained that identity this year, but I think just at the expense of the ability to stop other teams from scoring pretty much at all.
Which is
that was their true downfall.
You have to point that to the coach too, though. I feel like more than anything, and that will tie into
the
this.
Coach and the GM.
The coach and the GM. And this next question here, Tuba asks, Neville constantly crying about players and refs has to be the only consistent thing he does. Who does Paulson look at now?
Yeah, it's a good question about Paulson. I got to wonder.
Gio Savarese.
Merritt Paulson has not historically been the most rational.
Smart.
I was going to say rational, but yeah, he's the type of owner that when he feels like things aren't going well or the team is losing, he will he'll heat check.
He will.
I'm going to be keeping tabs on his behavior, whether Neville still has this job going into next year, which I think here's my guess on that. I think Merritt is too proud to admit that they might have bungled that hire and they could have gotten someone better. And I think based on that, I think they're going to give Neville they're going to be like, all right, that was a really bad ending, but it was Neville's first year. We scored 65 goals. Let's just do some roster movement, see if we can't shore up the defense. We'll give Neville one more go, and it'll probably go better next year, and we can kind of save face on this whole situation. That's what they're going to try to do. Will that work? Do you trust Ned Grabavoy and Phil Neville to like come up with the necessary changes they need to like make that a reality?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I don't know what evidence there is that you should or would.
I think up until literally that game, I think that was a good game plan. I think that's a good game plan, right?
Even if they had lost like 2-0.
Yeah, even if you lose 2-0, even if Evander, fires off those tweets, they hold themselves. They're fucked now because you chirp him back. Now he's like, why should you've got to be imagining you're already contract negotiating, which was contentious to the point where they had to stop contract negotiations mid-season and be like, let's just pick this up in the off season to try and like let him cool off. Well, guess what you did? You made the wrong decision. I mean, I think that they'll keep him as the coach, but like, you're cooked. You're cooked. This team is you put yourself in a position where now this team is cooked. I don't see any positive potential, which like as a Sounders fan, hell yeah, that's awesome. Objectively, like this is a unique situation I don't think I have ever seen in this league before.
It's a wild one for sure. All right. I think that actually segues into this last one.
Yeah.
So.
Jack asks, what is the funniest possible outcome of all of this?
He says, was this the funniest outcome possible?
Oh, I can't even read. Was this the funniest?
To answer that question, I mean, yes.
Yeah,
like that.
correct.
Out of all the entire range of outcomes that I would have prognosticated going into this game, them having the most catastrophic meltdown in MLS playoff history was not on the proverbial bingo card. But I think where I want to take that question is sort of like how Seattle should think of this, or like what is this? What is the takeaway from a Seattle perspective? Because I think it's worth asking. Like, obviously, Seattle fans are going to root against Portland all the time, and especially when the two clubs play each other. But for me, outside of like when they're playing each other, I don't really like care how they're doing all that much, to be honest. But like, I think you could argue that it's better for the dynamic of the rivalry for both teams to be at least somewhat relevant, in the mix, and not in turmoil, not feuding with their own fan base, not feuding with their own players.
Right.
Like, I want these games to be good,
Right.
Like, if they're just a mess the entire time, first of all, it doesn't matter because they're going to play like Real Madrid against Seattle anyway. So that's worth taking into account. No, like, you might think no matter how bad they get that, like, Seattle, like if they get really bad, Seattle will be able to beat them easily. I'll tell you right now, that's not the case. Like, this whole chaos and turmoil could get way worse. They'll still at least draw the Sounders every time they play and probably win.
Because God is a Timbers fan.
That's just how it works, because God is a Timbers fan, specifically when they play Seattle, apparently. But also, I don't know. Like, I just don't know if there's nothing wrong with reveling in it and gloating, but like, I don't know if long term Seattle fans should even want them to be this submerged in chaos and basically becoming like a joke of a team, because like you do want there to be like a lure to this rivalry. You want these games to be spectacles. Them melting down like this, it's just like it undermines that,
It undermines that, but it also pushes our agenda of LAFC are a bigger rival than the Portland Timbers. So just saying, vindicated as always, we're always right, yada yada yada. Thank you for your questions.
It is true. Real quick before we're gonna do some picks, right, to close it out on the playoff bracket. We'll try and keep that pretty short. But we are recording this as Atlanta United, who won the Eastern Conference wildcard game. We're playing Inter Miami. We have it up off screen here, so we were keeping tabs of the score, and Inter Miami won, as you might have guessed, but only 2-1. So not as lopsided a scoreline. I mean, I thought Inter Miami was going to probably hang 5 or 6 on Atlanta. They should have.
They should have, for sure.
Like, if you see that 2-1 and you think Atlanta had a chance in that game, I will tell you, even from only half watching it, every time I looked up, Inter Miami had a like huge XG chance that they were flubbing, and then
Brad Guzan masterclass is what I'm
Brad
hearing.
Guzan was going crazy.
Yeah.
Like, so Inter Miami, I think, looked pretty much like Inter Miami. They should have had a lot more than 2 goals in that game. But Atlanta United, they're out, which I think their fans were actively campaigning for as well. So we got a couple of big market or high profile clubs whose fan bases actively hate their own teams right now, which I think is pretty funny.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how this series goes, because like if Atlanta ends up pulling it back or, scoring a goal and it goes like that, trolling a third game against Miami, I'm just saying the more games Miami has to play, the higher chance that there's some kind of injury concern, and that just makes everyone else's chances go up. But I'll get into why I think Inter Miami, where they'll finish in this next segment.
Okay, yeah. You've got the bracket pulled up right there. Inter Miami have won game 1, so they're on the precipice of advancing, and so I think that makes that one pretty easy to pick. But other than that, we have a full clean slate of playoff matchups to pick from. So let's go through this and see who we got.
Yeah, so starting it off here, let's just start on the East Coast because that's where all the magic is. We'll start with Inter Miami versus Atlanta. Me personally, Ari, I'm picking Inter Miami. I know that's a controversial take. I know that everyone's going to be like, wow, you're so brave for picking that. But Messi, Suarez, Jordi Alba, all that,
Just keep it moving. We all know what's going to happen in that series. They may as well not even play game 2.
Exactly. Next up, we have Orlando and Charlotte.
This is actually I like this matchup because you have an Orlando team that got really hot late in the season, had a bad decision day, but they were one of the hottest teams in the league down the stretch. Shout out Nico Ladero. I don't know how much he had to do with that, but he had a pretty good year.
He's
for
there,
them.
so it doesn't matter.
But you have a Charlotte team that they are under the radar. None of the pundits are talking about them. We don't really talk about them that much, but they have the guy who's going to win goalkeeper of the year, Christian Kalina, who has really saved a lot of points for them this year, and they have a team that can scrap with you. They're kind of like the Nashville SC of like a couple years ago. That's like what the vibe Charlotte have going on right now. I think over 3 games, Orlando has a lot more firepower, so I'll take Orlando, but I think Charlotte could make that more competitive than people probably think.
Yeah, that's honestly, I had this down as my most anticipated series because
it's a good one.
It's not really
clash.
It is a clash. It's 2 not super talked about nationally teams. I think that we've both been ignoring both of these clubs, mainly because they're on the East Coast and like who gives a shit. But like this is legitimately the second hottest team in the league behind Seattle and Orlando in the backstretch, and then Charlotte, who has the best goalkeeper and also has been like this quiet little kind of dark horse talented team that
I hope Charlotte wins it.
That's and I was back and forth. I picked Orlando, but talking through it now, I could totally see a Charlotte coming up with a little dark horse win and then having to face the big bad Miami team. So let's continue. Sorry. Cincinnati, New York City FC.
This is another good one, and I think I'm gonna pick the upset here. I'm gonna take NYCFC. Bradley Wright Phillips, shout out BWP, posted his picks the other day, and he made a case for why he was picking NYCFC. That was mostly vibes based, but I also I think so. What I think about this one is that FC Cincinnati they have not been playing like to the level of where they are on the table for a while now because they've had so many injuries this year, and they've done a good job of staying afloat considering how many injuries they've had, especially on defense. They signed reinforcements and stuff, but they just have not looked like the Shield winning FC Cincinnati of last year for a while. And then this NYCFC team, they had a pretty inconsistent year, but they're one of the youngest teams in the league, and they're one of the hungriest teams in the league. Like, they have a lot of young guys coming up on their squad that are trying to prove their like status in the league and kind of live up to the NYCFC reputation, which is one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference of the last 10 years or so. They won an MLS Cup in really recent history in 2021, I think. So it's like their new guard trying to prove themselves. I think that kind of lines up for them to give FC Cincinnati a handful in this series, and I like NYCFC. I think they're going to do it.
Yeah, I'm right there.
It could be a bad pick.
That's what I had picked as well. I picked New York City FC. One, because also Cincinnati's been so injured. They've really kind of
They do have the best player, and that can go a long way in the playoffs.
I mean, they don't have the best player because Messi isn't on their team. But
well, I mean, out of these two teams, Luciano Acosta is the best.
That's very true. But yeah, I think that New York City FC is a team that's more playoff built though. Like they are young, scrappy, like a momentum team, right? Like when you're young, that's how you do it. And that is my pick: New York City FC over FC Cincy. I'm sorry, my friends in Cincinnati. This next one here, not even a competition. Columbus Crew, New York Red Bulls. Where are you at with this one, Ari?
I mean, yeah, I think the Crew and Inter Miami are going to be steamrolling through this Eastern Conference field, I think. So, yeah, I don't see the Red Bulls giving Columbus much trouble at all. There's a vast, vast gulf in firepower between these two teams. The Red Bulls have Forsberg, and that's pretty much it as far as I can tell. Columbus have an absolute buzzsaw.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Columbus all the way. Let's go over to the West. Starting off at the top here, LAFC, the big bad. What are they? Hawks, Eagles, something like that? Whatever. Hawks versus Vancouver. Vanni Sartini.
Yeah, I mean,
God's team.
Just based on recent history and the seasons that these two teams have, I think LAFC probably, unfortunately, takes this one pretty easily. The Whitecaps have been getting destroyed by LAFC every time they've played for the last 2 years. Haven't really shown much of an inkling of being competitive with this team. And I think that when you have multiple game series like this, where there's a lot longer of a sample where the two teams are playing each other, when there's this much of a talent differential, usually the team that's got the more stacked roster tends to win out. So I think that's an easy pick, even though I'm rooting for the Whitecaps.
My pick, and I'll shock you all.
Are you going to do it?
I picked the Vancouver Whitecaps to upset
I'd love
LAFC.
to hear the justification for this.
Here's my justification, Ari. I don't know if you're going to be ready for it, but vibes.
Okay.
Right? Okay, hear me out.
That's fine. A vibes pick.
Hear
Nothing
me
wrong
out.
with a vibes pick.
Hear me out. Riding high off of demolishing one of your rivals is the biggest crack for a team to start out the playoffs that anyone could have. Here's my take on this. There is precedent. Sporting Kansas City coming out hot and absolutely nuclearly destroying St. Louis. That is case in point. If anyone can get it done, it's Vancouver. They're riding high. And I also just I'm praying that is the case, because that would be just a fun, good bit. So that is my pick. Vancouver vibes are high. This next one involves a team we are all very familiar with, the Seattle Sounders versus the Houston Dynamo.
Yeah, I mean, I got Seattle in this series. We talked about it on the preview show, but I see Seattle as a slightly better, more advanced version of the Dynamo in some ways. I think they're pretty similar teams, but with Seattle having the home field advantage and what I see as a slightly better roster, I think they have the edge.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Seattle will. I think this was
the Dynamo are good and they're ascending, but they're not there yet. They need a little more juice to be a real contender.
Yeah, I could see this one going to 3 games, though.
Yeah, definitely, especially because Houston's usually pretty good at home against Seattle.
Yeah. So next up, we have RSL versus Minnesota. Minnesota, a team we've both been wanting to see more of, and RSL, the sort of semi-fallen giants.
Yeah,
from this
I
season.
see this as pretty even, but I think when you look at their form of late, and really dating back a while now, Minnesota's been in much better form. And Minnesota kind of have the vibe of we all remember when Seattle turned around in 2016 with Nico Ladero. Kelvin Yeboah has not been doing that for Minnesota, but they have a game-changing goal scorer now. And Robin Laud is low-key really underrated. Mm-hmm. And I got Minnesota here. I think RSL, outside of all that, RSL's been fading. They're very Chicho Arango reliant. If you can get him out of the game, then you can beat them in any game. They rely their whole team on Diego Luna, who's 20 years old.
Yeah.
So I think the Loons get it done here.
Yeah, I agree. I had the Loons as well. I think this one's going to go to 3 games as well, though. I think it'll be
I can see that. This one should be competitive.
This one is my Western Conference matchup to watch. Like, I'm actually stoked to see these two teams perform and see like what really is Minnesota all about. And here our final of the first round: LA Galaxy versus the Colorado Rapids.
Yeah, shout out to the Rapids, shout out to Chris Armas, but
X-Dog.
Yeah, I think the Galaxy take this series pretty easily. Again, there's a firepower differential here, where the Rapids they're improved. They've had a lot better of a year this year than they did last year when they finished in last. But I don't think they're quite ready to hang with a team that's got as much firepower as the Galaxy over a full series.
I agree with you. Galaxy this is a Galaxy podcast first and foremost, so. Obviously, we are.
I'm not picking against Joey Pants in the first round.
Yeah, like come on, let's be real. I'm right there with you. Let's go back, jump back over to the East. Let's just bring her down to the MLS Cup. See where you're feeling. You think are you willing to make those picks, or are you a little scared to put your opinions out?
Are we
there?
not going through like the semifinals and?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. We'll go through semis, but we both have a couple different picks. But let's just do that.
Oh,
you're right.
I see what you're saying.
No, you're smarter than me. This is the pundit, folks. This is why he's in charge. Inter Miami versus Orlando, rivalry matchup in the semifinals at the top of the East. Who do you see coming out on top there?
Miami.
And why would that be, Ari?
Because they're the best team in MLS history and have literally the best player who's ever played the game, who also brought over
700
three more of the top 15 players that have ever played the game. So that's why I'm taking Miami.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Inter Miami all the way. They are going to absolutely demolish Orlando in this game. I feel kind of bad that Orlando has to play them in this game. That's a tough rivalry matchup to have, but alas, that's what happens. Semifinal number 2 in the East, New York City FC versus the Columbus Crew. Hopefully they'll have a goalkeeper. What do you think?
Yeah, hopefully they have a backup goalkeeper. I'll take Columbus there, although when they've played NYCFC, like the last time they played, NYCFC was messing with them a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a dark horse, NYCFC could win that, but if I'm guessing, I'm taking Columbus.
Yeah, and it's like that Columbus will be home. They'll have home advantage.
Oh, God,
and
I kind of like NYCFC there, man.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna do it.
No, do it.
I'm not gonna
because you already know who's going to be in the final. You already know who's your pick for the final.
But I don't really believe in it. I got to go with what I actually think, and I think the Crew win that.
See, you're really not pundit brand.
It's cowardly, but
New York City FC Columbus. Me personally, I have Columbus simply because they're playing at home, and I mean they're going to be
the second best team in the league.
They're the second best team in the league. Back over to the West, the first semifinal. I had Vancouver, Seattle, but let's play it out. LAFC versus Seattle. Who do you have, Ari?
I'm sorry. There's just no people might not like this, but there's no way that I would ever pick Seattle over LAFC until I see them beat them.
Yeah,
that's just how I feel about it. And that might sound cynical and fatalistic, but we all saw what happened this year. There's no reason that any Seattle fan should feel any differently.
So you don't take any stock.
Prove me wrong. That's all I'll say.
I hear that. You don't put any stock in what some of the national pundits are saying that, well, it's a law of averages. Like, this is the time.
That's what I've said the last 3 times they've played. So no, I don't put stock in that. So, I dished that take myself multiple times, and it backfired every time.
The pundits just aren't ready to hear it. I had Vancouver versus Seattle. I say Seattle wins that. If it is against Vancouver, I'll give my take on the LAFC Seattle series because I think that's way more likely to happen. I'm going to go LAFC. I think it's going to be a close game. That's a penalty shootout win.
I think Seattle can win that game, but until I see them beat this team, which they have not done for a while, then why would I say that they're going to?
Well, and it's an away game.
There is no recent evidence to suggest that, and it's an away game.
Yeah, we have to go down to LA, which I'm gonna find any way to be there.
I felt similar to this in 2019, and they won it. So I'm definitely not saying that they can't win it. I just would not pick them to.
Well, if they play Vancouver, I say they go forward. So on my bracket, they go forward, but on yours, they're cooked in the semifinals. Next up, Minnesota, LA. This is a fun matchup.
Yeah, and I'll take the Galaxy there. Everyone knows my affinity for the Galaxy, so I don't think I need to explain it too much. But I could see the Loons messing with them in that game though too, because I do think the Galaxy's downfall will come sooner or later because they still love to concede really dumb and bad goals. So that could pop up this early, but I'll take them to go one more round.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the Galaxy, this is where the whole everyone's brackets, I think, could fall apart, is this game right here. The Galaxy are good, but they do not know how to defend. They've gotten better, but they still love to ship a good goal. I did pick the Galaxy over Minnesota, though, and that's that. So back over to the East. So this is, at this point, you're picking the top 4 from the whole league, right? You've got Inter Miami, you've got Columbus, you've got LAFC and LA Galaxy. We're not going any dark horses here.
I guess, yeah, I'm just taking all like the top seeds.
Yeah, you're just seeding it up. But I mean, I think that's fair. The talent gap is pretty high. Miami, Columbus, a matchup made in heaven. The two most insufferable fan bases of all time. The two fan bases and teams that think they run the league. Who's going to run it, Ari? Miami or Columbus?
Yeah, I mean, this would be a great game. But I've been pretty consistent all year that I think Inter Miami's level is higher at their peak than anyone else in the league, including Columbus. And I think as long as Messi and the Barca boys are healthy, I don't think anyone stops Inter Miami. I don't, even Columbus.
Here's what I'll say. I genuinely think Atlanta might be able to do the most freaky thing and take them to 3 games. And that's danger mode.
But this is single elimination at this point.
No, I understand. But I'm saying at this point, you will have played 4 matches.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
In short succession. Yeah. And I fear for the knees, ankles, legs, and everything of Inter Miami because Atlanta's going to be coming at you hard.
Injuries could change the calculation. I'm kind of thinking of it with relative full health.
And just the way that I look at their path, like Atlanta has nothing to lose. Next game is going to be chippy. It's going to be super chippy. You have to play your rival away. That's going to be crazy chippy. I don't see how you get out of that unscathed in some kind of way. Even this Atlanta game, there was like 2 people who went off with injury. Miami, Columbus. I think Miami goes down. I think we get a Columbus Crew in the MLS Cup final again.
Okay,
that's
my
take.
I like that.
So back
your bracket's much more exciting than mine.
I just like to add a little flair.
Yeah, you gotta add some flair. Mine's boring.
Conference final, Western Conference, LAFC versus LA Galaxy. The battle of the El Tráfico.
Yeah.
Are they going to play this at the Rose Bowl?
Okay, you know what? Probably.
That'd be sick.
You know what? This is where I'm going to pull my first upset here.
Let's go.
I'm going to take the Galaxy.
Let's go.
Here, I think LAFC are still a better team than the Galaxy. They certainly have a much better and more consistent defense. But like the El Tráfico games, that's not relevant.
No,
it's really not. Like the Galaxy compete in those games and win those games, even when their team was way worse than it was. And here's what I think the X factor is, man. Ricky Puig. No one fucking hates LAFC more than Ricky Puig.
Yeah.
He I think like when you watch Ricky Puig play LAFC, it's the most you can see like true hatred and disgust in the eyes of an opposing player towards another team. He's not going to let them lose that game.
Yeah.
They're going to beat him.
No.
And Ricky Puig is going to just have like the game of his life.
Yeah, I could see a Ricky Puig MLS Cup playoff MVP like arc happening for sure. I
love him. I love him.
I do
I love
Ricky
him.
Puig.
I love Joey Payne.
This
Sorry,
is an LA Galaxy podcast. What are you going to do?
Sorry.
But LA Galaxy versus LAFC, not the picks that I had, but if I was to pick out of those, I would also go Galaxy. That would be nuts. It would be so sick. That would be a great matchup. I had Seattle Galaxy in this one. I think the Galaxy bam on Seattle. I think this is where the Seattle...
So we both have the Galaxy coming out of the West. That's going to be a guaranteed bad take.
That's 100%, but that's
I like it, though. I like it. I'm going to stick with it. Yeah,
we're cooking on that. All right, so here is our MLS Cup finals. Each Ari has LA Galaxy versus Inter Miami. I have LA Galaxy versus the Columbus Crew. Galaxy podcast. Homers over here. Ari, whose lifting the Philip Anschultz, that's what it's
Yeah,
called, right?
yeah.
MLS Cup trophy. Is it the Galaxy or is it Messi and the Barca boys?
Oh my God, this Galaxy defense trying to stop Messi and the Barca boys. I mean, look, I hope this LA Galaxy pick coming out of the West hits. Like, we'll be happy if that happens.
Yeah.
If they actually have to go to Miami for MLS Cup, I mean, I think Miami probably destroys this Galaxy team just because. I mean, they're kind of similar.
They are similar.
They're kind of similar.
It is it's looking in a mirror.
Like Inter Miami is essentially the same profile as this Galaxy team if you injected like 4 of the top 12 best players of all time onto the Galaxy as opposed to just Ricky Puig, Gabriel Peck, and Joey Paints, who are all
It's their
very
ragtag.
good to elite.
They're bargain bin versions.
The Galaxy are bargain bin version, so I'm gonna take the Maserati
Yep.
over the Corolla. But
the Corolla
has
it'll
character.
last longer.
Yeah.
Like you get better gas mileage. I'm just saying.
Yeah. But oh man, that would be a pretty electric game.
And you're picking who's lifting?
Inter Miami.
Inter Miami and the Barca boys. All right. My final was LA Galaxy versus the Columbus Crew. Would you be shocked that I picked the LA Galaxy to
I love
win
it.
the MLS Cup this year?
I love it. I think it's a bad take, but I love it.
I think that
I like
the
your
chips,
bracket a lot more than mine.
I just
I like
think
your
that the
bracket a lot
way
more.
the chips fall, because every year there's some weird shit that happens in the playoffs. I think the way the chips fall, the Galaxy get a little bit lucky. They get an easy path to victory. And I think the Columbus Crew shit the bed again in another final. And we will have a dub pod. It will be a dub pod because this is an LA Galaxy podcast.
I know some people aren't going to like that, but that would be a dub pod. All right, we got our picks in. I feel like talking it out again kind of always like sort of fine tunes how I'm sizing up the matchup. So thank you to everyone who joined our bracket group. That's actually a lot.
We
of
actually
people.
got quite a bit of people here. So
Nice, good stuff, everybody. Appreciate that. We're gonna call it right there for episode 71. Thank you, as always, to everyone for tuning in. And thank you all for joining us for this vibe sesh on the downfall of the Portland Timbers. It's really, like I said, it was partially about gloating and making fun of them, but it's really it felt like an inflection point for their status among, like,
this is a historic moment.
It was a historic moment, and we had to cover it. And it's really, I don't think we're going to do like a Timbers dominated episode again unless it calls for it, but like we're going to be tracking their downfall. We're going to be tracking the Evander situation. That's a big story right now. So
Bring 'em home.
We'll stay on the Timbies beat, keep you all apprised of what's going on with them, because we're paying attention to it because it affects Seattle at the end of the day, and it affects the whole league. So appreciate you all joining us for that. Like, comment, subscribe,
Tweet
rate 5
hashtag
stars,
free Evander.
retweet Evander's thread because that was fire. Watch the Blazing Hot Presser on YouTube to pump up its views. Subscribe to our YouTube. Am I missing anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
Until next time, we out.
Peace.